Hey everybody, I'm Carolyn Byers. I'm Education Director for Madison Audubon Society, and today I'm here to welcome you to Herp Week. It's week 3 of our summer camp, and let's see, week 1 was birds, week 2 was mammals. Now we're on week 3, that's herps, and week 4 is going to be insects, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so herps, what are they? Herps is a short word for herptile, which is a word that means reptile and amphibians together. So if we're talking about herps, we're talking about reptiles and amphibians. And that is an enormous group of animals to smash into 1 week, but we're going to try to do it. And before we dig any deeper into this, I'm going to head over to the Madison Audubon Facebook page so that I can check this out live. So if anybody is watching who is a part of camp or who just really likes herps and you're here for this, write a comment. Tell me what you've been up to, what you're seeing, what you want to see, what you're excited for Herp Week. Let me know what you're up to. And if you're watching this and it's not live, you can still comment and I will still try to reply to you. And I'm definitely having trouble doing 2 things at once. Silly. Where is the link? Here we go. Okay. So I can see your comments now. So if you have something to share, write it down because I want to see. All right. So let's see. Today's a chilly day in Madison. I had jeans and a fleece on when I went outside. And herps are cold-blooded or ectothermic. So that means they can't produce their own body heat. They have to move their bodies or change their behavior in order to change their body temperature. So on a chilly day like this, I bet a lot of our herps are probably trying to find a sunny patch to warm up in or a nice rock that maybe soaked up some sunlight from the day. Those are all going to be warmer spots than somewhere that's shady or breezy. So I bet our herps are trying to stay warm today because it's chilly out in Wisconsin. All right, so let's see. This is a really, really big group of animals. And so let's tackle reptiles first, okay? So there are about 10,000 species of reptiles in the world. That's a lot. Only 35 of them live in Wisconsin, but that's still a pretty good number. And we have reptiles. They encompass turtles and snakes and lizards and crocodiles, and birds are technically in this group too, which is super cool. So these animals are special because they have scales or skin that keeps them from drying out. It's a nice protective barrier against the elements. And it also protects them from anything in the environment that might get into their skin. So if there's chemicals or something that really shouldn't be in their body, those scales will help keep that out. Let's see, what else? What's really special about them is that their eggs, they're leathery or they have a hard shell on them, and that keeps their eggs from drying out. So reptiles can lay their eggs on land, and they can be safe underground. And that's a special adaptation for them. That means that they're not tied to water. So they don't necessarily need a body of water in order to have their eggs. So if we jump over to amphibians, the story is a little different there. Amphibians, their eggs are covered in gel. So they don't have that really, really hard shell like a bird or like some reptiles, and they don't have a leathery shell either. Amphibians, they need to lay their eggs in water, otherwise they'll dry out. So amphibians always need a body of water, either a pond or a lake or a vernal pool, which is a really cool way of saying that it's a pool or a puddle that's not always there. So it might form during the spring and last for the first part of summer, but then as things start to dry out, it dries out too. So a vernal pool is a good spot for amphibians. Can anyone else think about why a vernal pool would be a good spot for amphibians to lay their eggs? Remember, this is a body of water that's not always there, and that's a really important clue about why it would be good for amphibians. So think about what might be different about a body of water that's not always there. So type your answers in the comments, and I'm going to keep talking because there's always a lag on this. So if you have an answer for me, type it in. All right, so we talked about how amphibians and reptiles have different coatings on their eggs, and that changes where they can lay their eggs. We talked about how reptiles have scales on their skin. Amphibians don't. They have something called semi-permeable skin, and it's smooth and maybe a little sticky, maybe a little moist. It's very soft. And their skin, semi-permeable, means that some things can get through their skin. So some amphibians can take water in through their skin. That also means that if there's chemicals in the water, that can get through their skin too. So it's a really interesting adaptation that they have. But if humans are messing with the environment, that could cause problems for them. So amphibian skin is really lovely. But another thing to think about is if you're going to pick up an amphibian, you should always have clean hands if you're going to touch an animal. But it is especially important if you're going to pick up a frog or a salamander or a toad, because if you have anything on your hands like sunscreen or bug spray, that could get into the animal's skin because they have semi-permeable skin. So if you're going to be touching a frog or a toad, make sure your hands are really, really clean. And if they're not, then it's a good time to just look, maybe take a picture, and then keep walking. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone's brave enough to comment about why vernal pools would be good for amphibians. So I think I'm going to tell you the answer. And my tripod's a little crooked today. So the answer is that if the water is not always there, if it dries up part of the year, fish can't live there because when it dries up, they'll have nowhere to go. So if it's a vernal pool and the water dries up sometimes, there will be no fish living in there. And that means that the fish won't be able to eat any amphibian eggs, or rather there won't be any fish to eat the amphibian eggs. So it's a really good spot for frogs and toads and salamanders to all lay their eggs because there'll be fewer predators there and fewer things to eat the babies once they hatch too. So vernal pools are so great for amphibians. Okay, let's see what else we should talk about. Amphibians are really neat, and we already talked about one of the reasons they're really cool. I mentioned tadpoles. So amphibians, their name means that they have a dual life. And when they're born, they start out as eggs, and then they hatch from their eggs and they're in what's called a larval state. So they're either a tadpole or they're a young salamander or a young newt. And usually they live underwater during that time. They have gills and they can breathe underwater. They don't need to come up to the surface for air. Let me see if I can find a picture of one of these. Let's see. I have my Amphibians of Wisconsin book that the DNR put out. It's pretty cool. And I want to try to find a picture of tadpoles. Here's one. So this is a bullfrog tadpole. And you can see it has a really big head, sort of starting to look like a frog, but it has a small mouth that it uses to eat algae and small eyes. And it has a really big tail behind its body, and it's just starting to grow its legs. And over here, we have salamander larvae. And these have external gills, these things on the side of their heads. They look like little horns or spikes. Those are actually their gills on the outside of their body, and that's how they breathe underwater. So then these animals grow up and they eat and they keep changing, and eventually they become the adult form of the animal that they're in. So a frog or a toad becomes a frog or a toad, right? They start as tadpoles and become frogs and toads. The salamanders, they transition from external gills on the sides of their heads to using lungs like we do. most of them. And at that point, they're able to leave the water and go live on land. And actually, I have someone to show you today. This is well, he's one of our teaching ambassadors. This is Dirty Smell. He is a tiger salamander. And before we go any further, I want to say that this is just his travel cage. He has a bigger tank that he lives in usually. Lots of space to dig and play. I've never seen him play. He mostly just digs. And so I put him in here right before I teach because there was one day I needed him to teach and I couldn't find him. It was really hard to dig him out quickly. So I put him in here so I know where he is. The other thing I want to say is that wild animals should stay in the wild for the most part. There are very few reasons that are good enough to bring them into captivity, because once they're in captivity, they have to stay there usually for their whole life. It's not good to release them again unless you're a specialist who knows how to do it the right way. So I have clean hands so I can pick up Dirty Smell. And the reason that this guy lives with us is that, he thought that the basement at our sanctuaries was a good spot to live. So Madison Audubon has two sanctuaries right now, Fayetteville Grove and Goose Pond. And at Goose Pond, there's a house where the people who manage the sanctuaries lives. And at that house, there's a basement. And that basement is usually very wet in the fall. And so these salamanders, they need to find a spot to hibernate for the winter. Because remember, their body temperatures are pretty dictated by the temperature outside. So on a cold day, they get cold. So these guys dig down really deep into the dirt during the winter, down below the frost line, and they hibernate during the winter like that. Some of them try to get into the basement at Goose Pond where they think it'll be a good spot. So I called up our land steward at the time and said, hey, I would love a teaching salamander. Do you have any in the basement? And the trouble is with the basement is that it dries out throughout the winter. And so what looks like good habitat in the beginning of fall ends up not being a good place for salamanders to live later on. But by then, you can't put them outside because it's the middle of winter. So when I called, they had 3 salamanders living in the basement. And by the time I got there, only this one was left alive. So this salamander definitely would have died if we didn't bring him into captivity. So that was a good reason for us. We also we have a permit to keep him, and he's a teaching animal. So he usually gets to meet hundreds of kids each year and helps them learn about amphibians and water quality and road salt, all kinds of things. So this is our tiger salamander. And he is a he, I believe. So males have 2 little bumps right here on either side of their tail. So I believe he's a male. And a lot of people are commenting on how cute he is. I agree. I think he's adorable. And you see his throat moving like that? That's how he breathes. And so Dirty Smell, let's see, he is about 10 inches long now. And they can get to be a foot long. So he's still got some room to grow. And in the wild, they can eat all sorts of insects and bugs that live underground. They eat a lot of worms. They can eat baby mice. They're really big. I feed him mostly worms because they're easy for me to get. And actually, he has become so accustomed to captivity that he will only eat worms if I dangle them in front of his nose with a pair of chopsticks. So he's definitely not getting released anytime soon. So what else? Who has questions about Dirty Smell? Anyone have questions? Everyone always asks about his name. This salamander did not have a name for the first 3 years that I had him, just because I wanted to pick a name that all kids would identify with. And so it was really hard to come up with something that was cool enough. But then when COVID happened, I had to bring him home to live with us. Usually he lives in my office at work. But since nobody's in the office, I had to bring him home to be with us. And I have a son who he just turned 3. But I think Dirty Smell was home for about 20 minutes and my kiddo named him. So this is Dirty Smell. Let's see, how do we know he's a tiger salamander? So first of all, he's big. And the next thing I do is I always check the range. That's where an animal can be found in the world. And there's usually a map. Let's see if I can find one. I'm going to put him back in his tank real quick. Ooh, Evie says hello. Hi, Evie. Good to see you. I'm glad you joined us today. So let's see. There's a map for the eastern tiger salamander. You can see this is Wisconsin. It's backwards, I'm sorry. But this darker band here is where you can find the salamander. And so I know where I found him was right about here, right in the middle of their range in the southern part. So I know that the tiger salamander is an option. But I also see this picture here has a lot more yellow on it than Dirty Smell does. So Dirty Smell, hi buddy. He's trying to get out of his box. Dirty Smell does have a bright yellow throat. And he has all these yellow spots on his side, but he doesn't have quite as many on his back. So there is a lot of what's called individual variation. And variation means just that it's the differences in animals and people. And individual refers to just one animal. So individual variation just means that animals can look different. So they can look different, and Dirty Smell is a little bit browner and blacker than most tiger salamanders, but he always looks like he's smiling. So, well, maybe right now he looks like he's frowning a little, but I think he's cool. Okay, does anyone else have questions about Dirty Smell? There is a whole long video about him and about tiger salamanders if you want to check it out. So I'm going to put him back and let him relax a little. He got to eat 2 big worms this morning, so he's feeling full and happy, but also maybe wants to digest a little. So I'm going to put him down. And I see no questions yet, so that is okay. All right, so let's talk about Herp Week. I am pretty excited for a few of the things today. So I was looking at the week's activities, and there's a lot of good stuff coming up. I want to go do a sit spot at a park near my house where I think I might be able to hear, well, maybe frogs aren't calling so much anymore. I only hear a few when I go out hiking. I heard a bullfrog at a pond recently, but it wasn't calling a lot. It was just once every now and again. But I do want to look for tadpoles. I bet they're getting pretty big. And the scavenger hunt where you look for things that herps could eat, that's what I'm excited for. I think my kiddo and I are going to go out a little later on a walk today and see what we can find. There's a frog call quiz that I'm really excited about. I love animal quizzes, especially when it's about animal noises. So I'm looking forward to that. So if you take the frog call quiz, send me an email or a message on Facebook. I want to hear how you did. Were any of them really hard? Maybe you got 100. I don't know. I want to do turtle races. And I want to do frog origami too. I love art projects. And the turtle races, you need to make your own turtle. And then you put it on a little string and you tie it to something. And when you shake the string, the turtle moves along the string. So if you do it with one of your family members, you can have races and see who can go faster. And frog origami is always fun because they really hop. Okay, so if anyone has questions about Herp Week, write them in now because we are almost done. And I just want to say one more time, that's a lie, I'm going to say it every time, that our programming is always free and it's always available to anyone with an internet connection and a way to access the internet. So I know that's sometimes restrictive for people, but we're trying to make this available to as many people as we can because we know that there's a lot of disparities in who has access to nature, and everyone should have access to nature. Everyone should be welcome in nature, and everyone should make sure others feel comfortable when they're out in nature. So if you are loving this programming and you feel like it's important, it would be wonderful if you could support us because every little bit helps. So I'm going to drop a comment or a link to click in the comments where you can go donate. But if that's not where you are right now, it's okay because it's still going to be here for you to use for free always because everyone needs nature. relaxes us and grounds us and helps us reset, and we all need that right now. So get outside, find some herps, maybe find some things that herps would eat, and enjoy nature. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.